Hi, this is Adrian Duncan again, and I'm teaching the 5th module out of our 6th module beginner's course in astrology. And the 5th module is about synthesis or the interpretation of the horoscope. So far we've learned about the signs, we've learned about the planets and how they are influenced by the signs, we've learned about the houses and how the houses show precisely what's happening in the physical world. And we've learned about the aspects, which shows the energy flow in the horoscope. So that's a whole lot of things we've learned, but I'm sure when you check out a horoscope, you're going to look at it and think, okay, where should I begin? And there is a kind of a sequence which is worth following. There are people do it differently, I think, and some people are more intuitive, some people are more logical in the way they go through through the horoscope. I tend to be the intuitive type, so I look at the horoscope and I think, okay, what's really important in this horoscope? But I still will start in a specific way, and I'll show you how, looking at the personal planets and the aspects they make, which I talked about last time, we can integrate that in a holistic interpretation of the horoscope. But before we go any further, there's one thing I haven't talked about, which is extremely important, and that is the rulerships, planetary rulerships. As you can see here in this drawing, each sign has an affinity with the planet, and they're called the ruler of the sign. And I don't really know where this has come from. It's like you have to go back into the early history of astrology to understand how planets have got this affinity with signs, but it works really well. Without understanding planetary rulership, you're never going to be anything more than vague in the interpretation of the horoscope. But when you understand how each planet has a sign, or two signs in fact, which it rules over, you can see much more specifically what's going on in the horoscope. You see a planet, for example, if you take Mars, which you can see here, it has an association with Aries and an association with Scorpio. Or if you take Venus, an association with Taurus and an association with Libra. Or Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and it also rules Pisces. Saturn rules Capricorn, and it also rules Aquarius. The outer planets are going to get integrated into this, like Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. I'll talk to you about that in a minute. But the point is that each of these planets is like an ambassador for the sign. You could imagine, if Mars is in Aries, it's said to be dignified. If Venus is in Taurus or Libra, it's said to be dignified. It's like you're in your own castle and you're ruling the show. But then these planets, Mars for example, might be moving through each of the 12 signs. And in each of these signs, it's going to have a kind of different experience. And in some signs it's going to be welcome, and in other signs it's not. It's a bit like if you were the American ambassador to Russia. If you were home, and you were Mars, if you were home, you'd be in Aries. But if you were in Libra, the opposite sign, which is said to be exile, detriment, it's like being the ambassador in Russia. Whereas Mars is also, each planet is exalted in a sign, and I'll talk about that at another time, but for example, Mars is exalted in Capricorn. It's a place where it kind of gets especially well treated. So if you were the American ambassador and in a British, in London, for example, Mars might be in Capricorn, and in opposition to exaltation, there's fall, which is really not a very good place to be. So if you were the ambassador, an American ambassador, and you were in Syria, which they don't have an ambassador right now, or Iraq or Afghanistan, that might be like having Mars in Cancer, in fall. So planets in their own sign are dignified, and they're very strong. And so anything connected with that planet is going to be generally throughout life quite good. And if the planet is in the opposite sign, it's other people that decide the show. You know, if you were the ambassador in Moscow, American ambassador in Moscow, you wouldn't tell Moscow how to run things. You have to pretty much adapt. And that's the idea with planets when they're in exile. You know, if Venus, which rules Libra, was in its opposite sign, Aries, basically you're on foreign territory and you have to pretty much adjust or keep a low profile to thrive on that territory. You can't start ordering people around. So this concept of the traditional planetary rulers of each sign is crucial if you're going to interpret the horoscope properly. And you have to understand, even if it's not politically correct psychologically, that some planets work really well or express themselves really well in some signs and not so well in others. You could also say, for example, that Mars, which rules a fire sign, would be reasonably happy in Leo and Sagittarius, which are also fire signs. Or the moon, which rules water sign Cancer, would be reasonably happy in Pisces and Scorpio. But the moon is not happy in Scorpio because it's exalted in Taurus and in fall in Scorpio. So there are certain exceptions to logic here. So as you can see here, there's a kind of system to it. The moon rules Cancer and the sun rules Leo, and you can sort of see how Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo, Venus rules Taurus and Libra, Mars rules Aries and Scorpio, Jupiter Pisces and Sagittarius, Saturn Aquarius and Capricorn. There's a kind of symmetry to it, and where that symmetry, I suppose that's how the rulerships were devised originally, because the sun and Leo definitely kind of have this very, very strong affinity of strong identity, and the moon and Cancer have this very, very strong affinity of emotional life, as Mercury and Gemini and Virgo and mental capacity. Gemini and Virgo have got that just as Mercury have, etc. So there is, undeniable strong affinity between these 7 traditional planets. Those are the ones that were visible from the sky. There has been a trend in astrology since then to assign rulership of the recently discovered planets like Uranus, Neptune and Pluto. So that people would say Neptune rules Pisces, Uranus rules Aquarius and Pluto rules Scorpio. And there's no doubt there is an affinity between Neptune and Pisces, Uranus and Aquarius and Pluto and Scorpio. They do have quite a strong correspondence, but they're not really rulership. The rulership is that Jupiter rules Pisces, Mars rules Scorpio and Saturn rules Aquarius. And the reason for that is the outer planets, these 3 outer planets, are really collective. They don't represent people or things. They represent force majeure, or collective forces. So that you can't actually, when looking at the horoscope, say they are this person or that person or this thing or that thing. They're kind of strong forces which are beyond human control in a sense.